Soundstripe.
Hello and welcome to the Natalie Wisewoman podcast, a place where I bring in the wise women and men of this world to discuss topics related to becoming your highest potential. Enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Natalie Wisewoman podcast. We are in season 2, and I am honored and excited to have Aleksi Hupli with me today. He is a writer, researcher, working at the University of Tampere, currently also a drug policy activist. And we are going to talk about psychedelics and legislation around that, different attitudes and experiences. And Aleksi has specifically written a book that has just come out a few weeks ago related to this topic. So it's an honor to have you here, and you are truly an expert in this field. That is what I feel after reading your book. And I also feel like I could call you like a wise man, because I like to have wise women and wise men on this podcast. And with that, I mean that I can also feel from your writing that you kind of you are looking for also wisdom and this knowledge, and kind of how can we help humanity? How can we look at humans from a different perspective, and I really like that. And I think that's part of why you're doing this activism. Like, you really want to have a humane way to look at things, and it's knowledge, and it's not just about the facts and the rules, but really about like, how can we have a functioning society? And I'm excited to have this discussion with you today. I think that this topics on kind of psychedelics and psychedelic research and legislation is really important, considering the situation we have today regarding mental health, regarding addiction, and also I think it's inevitable that we are in a new time with the psychedelic movements, and things are changing, and there's really no way going back. So I think it's important to have these discussions and do research on these topics. So we will talk a little bit about you, about topics from your book, about different drugs and illegal drugs and medicines and different things, and also attitudes, like I said, and what the attitudes are in Finland, and the future of psychedelic drugs or substances. So I would like to start by asking you kind of what is your background and what compelled you into this specific field?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation and the kind introduction. Very pleased to have this discussion. I don't know how far should I go back with my own story. I mean, I do come from a family of doctors, both of my parents being medical doctors, my great uncle and his wife, my brother nowadays. So I've been exposed to that since I was a kid. Remember seeing all these little packages and pens with different types of medicine names, and have all kinds of um, merchandise that doctors were given back in the day. My grandmother was a pharmacist, so I don't know. I've been kind of exposed to the field of medicine and pharmacy as well since growing up. But I knew from a very early age that I'm not going to be a doctor. I remember seeing like medical books with like surgery pictures and feeling a bit lightheaded and woozy. Like, that's not for me. And I was really interested in history. I tried to become a political history student in Helsinki University, but failed a few times. And then I discovered sociology. And sociology was kind of like, it had everything. It had history, it had current topics, you can do everything with sociology. And I first wanted to do more like sociology of health. And I was really interested in different health differences between socioeconomic groups and stuff like that. But then I had to choose my bachelor thesis topic. This was around 2009. And I remember getting advice to choose a topic that's being discussed at the moment in the society. And there was a discussion about whether in Finland women who are diagnosed or considered to be substance abusers or having a substance use disorder, whether they should be enforced into treatment to protect the health of the fetus. And there was a governmental report that came out, and I got some media coverage, so I was seeing, okay, this seems to be a topic that's being discussed at the moment, so I chose that. I kind of analyzed some of the political discussion that was going on in my bachelor thesis, and then later in my master thesis in Helsinki University. And I mean, that discussion has these really strong symbols, the bad mom or the drug using mom and the innocent fetus, and there was just all these kind of arguments why we should protect the fetus against this evil mom type. And of course, there's all these kinds of ethical and practical things that are not really in favor of this kind of treatment. First of all, even nowadays, it's hard to get treatment voluntarily. So I don't know where with the governments or the municipalities get any kind of funding to enforce somebody to treatment for 9 months at least. And so that was like my starting point into the field of drugs and drug policy. And at the end of my master's, I wanted to kind of specialize more in medical sociology. So I was looking at what kind of opportunities there were. There wasn't that many courses in Finland on this topic, so I was looking at what other countries had to offer, and then I found this really nice medical anthropology and sociology master's program in Amsterdam, which was a nice city. I've been there a few times before that, so I like that was a bonus to kind of find a good program in a city that I enjoyed. And I went there, and my initial plan was to look at, okay, how do they deal with the same topic over there? I mean, they're known for their liberal approach when it comes to drugs and drug policy. But then it was one of the first lectures that we had about contemporary topics, and the word enhancement came. It was about chemical enhancement. It was more about using some sort of chemical bleaching technique in some countries. But the word enhancement kind of stuck, and it's kind of, I don't know, there was like this light bulb moment that there was, okay, there's this other side of drugs that I never heard of, nobody really talked about, that there can be benefits to different substances. And that was like, I don't know, I still remember that feeling. That I was like, wow, this is quite interesting. So I did my master thesis on the topic, interviewed local students, had a little survey about what students used for that kind of enhancement purpose, what they thought about it, what kind of ethical attitudes they had towards whether it was considered cheating or not, that kind of stuff. And then continued that in my PhD at Tampere University, which took about 7 years to complete, but I did complete it in 2021, titled Smarter with Drugs, ? The sociology of cognitive enhancement from users' perspective. And yeah, it's a kind of mixed. There's 5 different articles. One is about microdosing psychedelics on YouTube videos. One is about a case study of a medical cannabis patient in Finland he had ADHD. A few of them were based on my master thesis data together with a few other students. We kind of combined all these interviews that we had and looked at how people or students in Holland and Lithuania experienced different kinds of effects from these cognitive enhancers. And then I kind of felt like, okay, this was in English, this was an article, very academic, and I felt like, okay, there's still some room in me that wants to kind of bring this discussion more in Finland, although it was in a Finnish university that this was published. I felt like there's even the word enhancement is kind of maybe difficult to translate into Finnish per se, and there's all these other discussions that I kind of felt that I still wanted to bring about, and in a less academic way. So I was fortunate to find a publisher. Siltala Publishing was willing to hear my idea about it, and then a few years after my PhD, I managed to publish this little thing, which I really like the cover. I think my graphic designer Emil Mulka did a great job of making the cover really nice, and it kind of if you see it on a bookshelf, it might kind of be drawn to it, hopefully. And yeah, part of it is just bringing my kind of academic learning curve into Finnish language and in a kind of more popular science kind of way, but it is also in a way a form of activism, trying to bring discussion about these substances and their potential benefits, not forgetting that there's potential harms as well. I'm not, my message is not that there's no harms in these substances. There's a nice quote from a Swiss researcher of psychedelics that, if I remember it correctly, it's something like anything that's powerful can be harmful, and nothing that's not powerful. No way, this is not exactly how it went, but if it's powerful, it can be harmful as well. And if it's not harmful, it's probably not powerful. So there's always that side as well, that with something that is powerful, there's potential harm. But I always kind of say that people don't seek, or they don't use them for the harms. They seek some sort of benefit from them. And that's the other side of the coin, that they do exist as well. There's always this kind of harm benefit ratio that you need to kind of consider. The benefits are not discussed as much, but they're there. And it's not a great discovery. It's quite obvious as well. I mean, but it took a PhD to kind of make that statement that there's potential benefits to different kind of substances.
Mhm. I think it's amazing that you have brought more awareness on this topic in Finland. And obviously, you're spending a lot of time on drug policy and on these topics. So, why do you think it is important to bring more awareness and also do research on these topics?
Well, I mean, part of it is that we've had this kind of prohibition system for half a century now. And I mean, if you look at what it doesn't prevent people from using, if that was ever the kind of goal. I mean, that is kind of the stated goal, that, we have to prevent people from using these. Well, it's not doing that. And as a matter of fact, I think our policies are bringing more harm than benefits. And in my PhD, I also talk about these kind of politicogenic drug effects. So not effects that come from the drugs themselves, but the policies around them. And they can be all kinds of things, from fines to jail time to losing custody of your children, or not being able to get the study career or the job that you wanted because you're considered to be a user of something that's illegalized. So I mean, there should be, on the other hand, more discussion about the benefits of drugs themselves, but also more discussion about the harms of the policies that are surrounding them at the moment. And it doesn't seem to be like a big thing, but just the other week there was a big United Nations meeting in Vienna, where the UN headquarters of drugs and crime is. So these things are linked in that system. But for the first time in decades, there was the mentioning of harm reduction in one of the resolutions, which has not happened before. It's been, of course, harm reduction is something that's been going on for decades, but this was the first time that harm reduction was mentioned in a United Nations narcotics resolution. And there was a big victory for harm reductionists all over the world, but it just kind of shows how far we still have to go in order to kind of have more sensible drug policies that now they're mentioning harm reduction for the first time, which is great, of course, but it took, decades of work to get to that point.
Yeah. I want to discuss the drug policies and legislation later in this podcast, but I wanted to talk about something that you talk about in your book, and that is that what we consider drugs or illegal drugs is actually bound to time and the culture that we are in, and you discuss that some of the stuff that are illegal today have actually been used as medicines in the past, and many of them, if not all of them, and in many cultures today they are still used as medicines. And as an example, I'm here in Peru, and many of the things that would get people into jail in Finland are considered absolutely normal. Like, people here eat coca leaves to survive because they live in the Andes and up in the mountains, and you wouldn't survive without the coca leaves that you put in your mouth. And San Pedro, which has mescaline, which is illegal in Finland, is grown on every porch here. So it's like a different kind of culture and viewpoint, and they don't see the harm in it, because they have a culture also built around it, and kind of respect also to these plants and that they call medicines. So so it seems that there is we have arbitrary, like, decided what is illegal and what is not, and these are not actually based on the how addictive the component is. It's not on what kind of harm it has, or any kinds of facts, but it's just like we have decided something is wrong and something is okay. Like, we can drink coffee and we can drink alcohol and we can smoke cigarettes and eat as much sugar as we want, and and then the other stuff you go to jail for. So I wanted to kind of hear your viewpoint on this, and I think it's really interesting. In the book, you have like a table of different substances and how they how much harm they have to the person using the substance, and how much harm they have to other people around. So would you like to open a little bit about what is shown in this table, and also what is your viewpoint on this topic?
Yeah, there's been a few of these kinds of studies where they compare the harms of different substances, and usually the number one of them is alcohol, which of course is a legal substance in most countries, not all. And of course there's country specific differences in terms of these. Like, the one table that I have in my book is a study from the UK, and in that the least amount of harm comes from LSD and psilocybin mushrooms, but also mentions buprenorphine as one of the least harmful ones, which actually in Finland is one of the most harmful ones, because that's mostly involved in drug poisonings and drug deaths in Finland. That's buprenorphine. We don't have heroin, for instance, much at all in Finland. So there's going to be different kind of differences depending on the country. And I mean, and they've only looked at comparing the harms of substances. So it'd be very interesting to also do it, comparison of the benefits of different substances and how that would then scale in comparing all these different things. But yeah, it is arbitrary, and although the argument is usually made that the illegal ones are illegal because they're harmful, that's not really the case. I mean, they're harmful because they are illegal. There's no quality control, there's no age restrictions, there's no, you can't go and complain to anybody if there's something in your whatever little baggie that you bought, that if there's something that's not supposed to be there. We have regulatory, regulations in place when it comes to medicines, and you know exactly what's in there. You know the dosage, you know what the substances are in there. There's they've been gone through clinical trials to show that they're at least safe, and they should be also, of course, also effective. So there's those placed for certain substances and medicines, but not for others, which of course increases their potential harm as well. If you don't know what you're using, you don't know the dose, there's going to be potential harms coming from that, and that could be fixed. with legal regulation, but that's kind of like a, what do you call them, like a red flag that, you can't, it's hard to even discuss that. I mean, like bringing that discussion to the point where we start thinking about the little specifics per substance. You would have to think about what's the best legal regulations for cannabis, and what's the best legal regulation for psilocybin, what would be the best for some stimulant, for instance. I mean, they're very different from with regarding effects, so there should be, of course, different regulatory models. And there is, for instance, a UK-based foundation called Transform Drug Policy Foundation that has a lot of nice reports about stimulants, cannabis, psychedelics, providing information about different regulatory models. And I mean, I mentioned them in the book, but I mean, the discussion here, even about decriminalization, seems to be like, no, you can't do that because that will promote drug use, or like there's all these different kind of counter arguments that are getting old, or well, not just getting, they've been old for a long time, but like to go beyond that point where we could actually start discussing, okay, what would be the best model for this substance in this country? I mean, we have alcohol consumption rooms all over the place. They're called bars, and so why not have something like that for other substances? Because not everybody likes to drink alcohol, and as mentioned, it's one of the most harmful substances there is. Partly, of course, because it's so normal, it's so available. It's becoming apparently even more available in Finland as well. So that's why we also need to find other, well, we need other treatment modalities for people that, develop a problem with alcohol as well. And that's also something that I'm very interested in.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting when some countries have actually decriminalized some of these illegal substances. The statistics that have come out are actually quite mind-blowing. Like, I know Portugal, for example, you can correct me if the statistics are wrong, but when they decriminalized a lot of the illegal drugs, their crime went down with like 50%, or like, violence and all these things reduced. And people are saying that no, you would have more violence and you would have, everything would go crazy. But in fact, actually, what we have when we've tried this is data that actually it has had very good effects.
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of infections fell down. I mean, from hepatitis to HIV and all that kind of stuff. When there's, you know, if you can go and seek help without fear of being prosecuted by the law, then the threshold is a lot smaller in those moments when you feel like you need help. Surprise.
Yeah. So I want to discuss the attitudes around illegal substances and psychedelic drugs, because obviously you've been involved in this field for some time, and I can only remember that when I heard about drugs for the first time I think it was in school. What we were taught was that basically the gateway theory, that if you touch one of these illegal substances, if you touch weed, then you will become a heroin addict, basically, like you will go all the way. And I think that is not the case, and I know that many people know that already, but I mean, I maybe look at it that if someone has a lot of pain and they are trying to reduce that pain with any kind of substance, alcohol or weed or whatever, and that is not enough, then they will go to something which will reduce pain even more. So it's not really about the substance, or that, if you do one thing, then you will automatically do all of these other things, but maybe it's about what's the intention. And if someone is really in pain, then they will find their ways to reduce that pain. And then sometimes even that substance can be the only thing that has kept them alive, because if they would not have anything to deal with the pain, then they might have taken their life. So in a sense, these can also be lifesavers, although they are not kind of a cure necessarily for the situation if you don't have the right kind of support around that. So how do you see that the attitudes have changed since you were in school, since you learned about drugs for the first time, and considering now how people look at it? And, you know, what are some of the signs that we are in a psychedelic renaissance and something is changing?
I mean, I don't remember much drug education growing up. I mean, there was very, very little of it. I think we went to see Requiem for Dream, the movie, and that was it. I mean, it has very particular kind of drug use imaging in that. But I mean, looking at, for instance, you know, the National Household Survey in Finland that looks at different kinds of attitudes, it has become more and more tolerable, liberal in that kind of sense that more and more people are supporting decriminalization. They are supporting safe consumption rooms. They are supporting medical cannabis and that kind of stuff. And I think there's a big generational gap in that. You know, the older generation seems to be not so reluctant of thinking these things any other kind of way that the way they were taught. I mean, I can't blame them either. Like they were really the scare tactics back in the I don't know 60s, 70s were probably even more or stronger than when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. And you know, most youth parties in Finland are in favor of decriminalization or even legalization of cannabis, at least. So it is more, I think, a question of when things will change, and not necessarily whether they will change, but it will take time. But I mean, the amazing thing also is that, you know, in Finland there was no clinical trials of psychedelics 2 years ago. There was a few attempts before that, but they didn't succeed. And now, in a way, we are the leading European country when it comes to psilocybin-assisted therapy research for alcohol use disorder. So things can happen quite quickly as well. I think Finland, in a way, because we are a relatively small country, the change can be quite quick. We can turn the ship around quickly if needed, and if there's enough political will, of course. But it is a sort of a signal of that things can change and they will change. Of course, it's still a long way to go, you know, whether any of these treatment modalities will become legally available and whether there's going to be, you know, are there going to be private clinics or public health sector? Will they, you know, if there's any insurance coverage and what's the required education for therapists and all that kinds of questions remain. But it is a sign that there's some sort of psychedelic renaissance also coming to this part of the world, which comes with its harms and benefits. Of course, there's you know, there's this one vision of the future that, you know, you can go to a private clinic in order to get a treatment that will cost quite a lot, but you're still not allowed to go to the forest and pick your own mushrooms. So, I mean, that's not necessarily ideal in my kind of in in the kind of world that I would like to see.
Yeah. So you have been involved with the government in Finland and also with some EU projects. What do you think has changed? Because you said now that there are a lot of research going on, and recently there was none. So what do you see is the main factor that has changed this? Because and you write in the book also about the attitudes of like Kela and THL, the Finnish healthcare institution. And I remember just when I was working at Kela for as a specialist for the rehabilitative psychotherapy, I could see that there was a difference in we had some doctors that were really understanding that if someone has, for example, is using cannabis, then actually therapy can be very supportive for that. But then there were some doctors, again, that had the viewpoint that if you even use it like once a week, then that will you cannot go to therapy because you won't get any benefit. But then again, if you have a glass of wine every evening, then that's fine. So I mean, I can see that there are mixed viewpoints, and I guess this is everywhere. But what is it that you see that has changed now?
What has changed, I guess, is that there's been more positive media coverage about these things. There's more actors involved. And also there's more research money involved. I mean, there's also, there's companies that are listed in the stock market now that are, researching and developing psychedelic medicines, and you know that that has changed definitely in the last 5 to 10 years, and will continue that path. I would assume so. Um, and um, there's Netflix shows that show psychedelics in a quite positive way, and I mean, there's podcasts, there's books, and there's TV, and there's all that kind of stuff that can show another side to people that they are not necessarily familiar with. But it will also create discussions inside families and among friends about this topic in a I'd say in a more positive way. That's not just that kind of messaging that just say no, and you can't do this, and they're all just harmful and will lead to madness. So there's a change in that discussion as well, which kind of comes down from that macro level into family and friends having these discussions as well, and that will I would guess kind of change attitudes and steer us towards hopefully more humane drug policy in general as well.
I want to discuss the topic of legalization, and I've taken some courses on psychedelic research, and what I've understood is that people that have been discussing with the European Drug Administration, it's not a question of if these substances will be legalized, it's a question of how and when they will be. So I want to hear your viewpoints on, because you probably know like what's actively going on. And I also want to discuss maybe my own fears, because I don't really have haven't had like a strong opinion on whether we should legalize or how we should do it. Obviously, I think that the way we're doing it now is not working. But then I have this fear of maybe big corporations coming in. Like, let's say we would legalize cannabis and just like cigarettes. And then these big corporations would come in and basically do to the plant of tobacco the same thing they have, or what the same thing to cannabis, what they have done to the plant of tobacco, which is basically pour on 3,000 chemicals that are actually really toxic. And then, there would be a lot more harm in using cannabis, marijuana, than there is when you don't do that. So kind of making it something. And they did the same with basically coca leaves as well. Like they pour gasoline and everything and make it a drug that's very harmful. So that's one of my fears, that they will come in and find, obviously there's a lot of money involved, and then also, like you were saying, that pharmaceutical companies or medical industry will make these legal in some specific way, but then you can't go and pick your own mushrooms, or mushrooms would be illegal, but psilocybin or something that they extract that's similar to it would be okay in a kind of healthcare setting. So those are kind of my fears that I have of the future, and I would love to hear your opinion. And then what I'm kind of interested in, or what I'm lacking in the discussion, because there's a lot of discussion obviously on research and the benefits and talking about different mental health issues that these substances can help. But what I'm not hearing so much, and I understand that in the West it's very difficult to kind of consider the maybe indigenous or the shamanic perspective, but thinking about working with indigenous people, like in the Andes and the Amazon forest, these are sacred medicines. And then if we just take them and put them in a clinic and kind of don't consider the kind of spiritual aspect of them, then I think that we are doing ourselves a disadvantage. So I would love to hear your opinions on this.
Yeah, I think the medical route, in a way, even though it's expensive, it's long, but it is in a way the easier route for more wider accessibility and hopefully wider access as well. Kind of like a start, use um the the what do you call it? Not the stepping stone, but like we talked earlier, the a gateway theory. You get something in and then it kind of spreads. So hopefully the medical will develop, and I think the European Medicine Agency is very, it seems to be quite open to this if it's done, in a good, rigorous way. There was a big European Horizon research funding for psilocybin assisted therapy for palliative care, but non-cancer palliative care. So different other disorders like ALS and MS. So they gave, I think, 6 million euros for that. So that field is definitely opening, and that, I mean, it is a positive, but as you've said, there's that kind of danger that we're gonna kind of westernize and reduce it into this kind of very patentable pharmaceutical kind of thing, and kind of lose all the history and all the kind of the shamanic knowledge that comes with it as well. And but I think the medical route is going to develop, but it's going to be hard to sell that, that it's not just medicine for the ill. It can be beneficial for everybody, or or just for for the fun of it, for recreation. I mean, that's I think it's going to be harder to sell in a way, that message. But I mean, there is, as I kind of write in my book as well, that there are benefits for also for us, normal, in quotes, the benefit of the well, or the betterment of the well, as they say it. And one way of doing this, because we have a big aging population, the baby boomers, who were in a way the most victimized of the war on drug rhetoric, but they would be also the ones that would probably benefit the most at this point from these substances. So like being able to somehow, well, not necessarily convince them, but to show them that they're not as dangerous and harmful as they've been claimed to be, and that they could be beneficial for all kinds of aches that come with age, and they could be beneficial in 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 just, or having that experience in your life is something that's worthwhile having. But I do agree with you that there is that kind of danger that they're just going to be uh, made into a commodity that not everybody has the permission or the um, resources to have, and that's not necessarily, that's not a good thing. That they should be, if they're made available, that there should be, there could be specialized clinics that deal with people that are very sick, and they need extra care, and they need certain kind of professionals to handle that. But maybe there could be other kinds of places where grown-ups, adults, using their free will and wanting to change their neurochemistry somehow, would be allowed to do that. I mean, we're allowing that with alcohol, we're allowing that with tobacco and coffee, which have also has their, indigenous origins, but we made them into commodities in many ways. But now they're part of our everyday life almost. Not necessarily every day, but still, they're normal nowadays. They weren't normal 100 years ago, 200, something like that. So we'll see. Maybe we'll have microdosing cafes, or we'll have some sort of stimulant rooms, or we'll have, I don't know. There can be a lot of innovation in that, what that will be like, but before we kind of get to that point, I think we still need to work quite hard and a lot just to kind of stop people to be imprisoned for changing their neurochemistry.
That's very helpful information for me. So I kind of get more calm in this matter, and kind of what you're saying is like we have to start somewhere, and maybe it's a good way to go the medical route and then start with people that are actually ill and need help, and then when we see the benefits, then maybe we can expand from there. And I do have trust because I see this happening, and at the same time as we have the psychedelic renaissance and all these new things happening, I also see that spirituality is growing, and I do have trust that we can then somehow combine and find a way to kind of use these things if they become like very normal, to use them also for a spiritual development. So you touched upon, like, normal and people that are well using these things, and you write about it in the book, kind of using these substances as a technology for humanity and for human evolution. Can you open up a little bit more what your views are on this topic? Like, how is it a technology?
Well, that was kind of my way of bridging the gap between the illegal drugs and the legal medicines, to kind of see them both or all as technologies. There's somebody that designs that technology, there's somebody that develops that technology, produces it, somebody that ships it around the world, and at the end of the day there's that somebody that uses that technology, the end user or consumer. And that was kind of just a helpful way of thinking about these, and also kind of making them in a way more neutral, because when we think about illegal drugs, there's immediate that kind of like a negative connotation to it. And when think about legal medicines, there's well, if it's medicine, of course, then it should be good for you. And neither of those are necessarily true. You can overdose on medicines and die, and you can have benefits from the illegal substances. So that kind of way of looking at them as technologies kind of brings a bit of a distance to the topic, so you can maybe look at it in a kind of more objective kind of way, but also remembering that technologies are not neutral. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is nuclear energy. You can produce energy or you can destroy cities. So it's more about how you use it, not the technology itself, but it's how you use it. And hopefully we'll learn to use these technologies in a smarter way.
Yeah, I think that's like my main viewpoint on everything. And you wrote about this shortly, kind of what is the motivation, the intention with using these, and that's specifically very important in the kind of using psychedelics like mushrooms or ayahuasca or something like this. It's like, what is the intention? But I think with everything we do, intention is important. Like, why are we eating something? Why are we having sex? Why are we doing all these things? Like, they can be harmful. Like, you can have excess of everything. You can eat too much, you can have too much sex, you can do it, like everything can be good or bad. And I think it's about, is it in harmony with your highest potential, or is it like disharmonious to your highest potential? And that's I think where we have to have honesty with ourselves, of why are we actually doing something. So I think that's a good point with every technology and everything we're doing. Basically, we can have good or bad intentions.
Yeah, you can overdose on water. I mean, that's one example as well.
Yes. So for people that speak Finnish, I would love to introduce your book. So you have written one book on cannabis, am I right? And then this new book. So do you want to open a little bit more what those are for people and where they can find them if they want to read your books?
Yeah, so first book was Lääke, Cannabis, Tiedettä ja tosielämän tarinoita, which I wrote with Maria Vihervaara, came out 2021 from Pasam Books. So the title translates into medical cannabis science and real life stories. So Maria had interviewed a lot of Finnish patients who had used cannabis to deal with all kinds of illnesses, from pain to ADHD to so there's all these little stories inside there as well, together with more the history, the science, what medical research is saying about. And I guess you can find it in bookstores or from the publisher's website, I guess, as well. And then the more recent one is Älylääkkeistä ja päihteistä, tajusteiden hyötykäyttö. So I think the word tajuste in Finnish comes from tajuntaan vaikuttava aine, so a substance that affects your consciousness, I guess, would be one very long way of translating it in that. And then hyötykäyttö is just beneficial use, I guess. But both of these words are not very common in Finnish, at least yet. We'll see how they develop. And hopefully there's some good discussions that come out from both of these. But of course, the more recent one, we'll see how that develops. The medical cannabis book is still it is the only book about this topic in Finnish. And maybe I should at some point start writing in English as well. I mean, my PhD was in English, so that's also available, of course, for English readers. But there's a difference when you write in your own native tongue, and I think Finnish language is very nice and flexible. You can kind of develop words or come up with words and kind of create the language in a very flexible way as well.
And you also have a YouTube channel, right? I don't know how active you are there, but you have Drug Ventures, right? For people and that's in English.
Yeah, that was sort of it started when I was in New York in 2016. I was planning to do similar interviews with students about smart drug use, but I couldn't get an ethical clearance. But then I found a 360 camera, and being an anthropologist, I thought this is a great way of making field notes, because I was always kind of like, how do people, participate and observe in a reliable way, and how can they communicate that to others? And I was like, well, 360 video, that will do the trick, because it will basically record everything I see and everything I don't see, because it's the 360 view. And then I collected all kinds of footage, and I still have plenty of footage, but I didn't really know what to do with it, because I didn't know how to publish academically 360 video footage. So then I just decided to put it on YouTube, which has been less active recently, but hopefully I will get back to that as well, because I have plenty of footage from the years that I've been traveling around the world, just looking at drugs and drug policy in different kinds of perspectives. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that as well.
And what are you working on right now in this field of drug policy and psychedelics?
Currently, I'm doing a postdoc research at Tampere University, focusing on non-medical grade cannabis use. So I'm starting a questionnaire soon and collecting some interviews of Finnish people who use cannabis for self-medicated purposes, but not on prescription. Partly because it's very hard to get a prescription in Finland for medical cannabis, but also it hasn't really been looked at. The research mostly has focused on the prevalence of use and recreational use and the harms, but I'm looking at why and how and what type of products people self-medicate. And I'm also coordinating one of the clinical sites in regards to the psilocybin-assisted therapy for alcohol use disorder through A-klinikka. We have a clinical site in Kouvola at the moment. There's 3 other sites in Finland, in Helsinki and Turku, by Addictum, and also in Oulu by Mental Care, and this is sponsored by a Canadian biotech company called Clairvoyant Therapeutics. And it's been quite fascinating to, as a sociologist, to be part of a clinical trial. I mean, I had no background in this before, but we have a very good team of 2 great investigators who are medical doctors, and a team of 6 very qualified therapists as well. So it's been interesting to see that side, and hopefully it will be completed successfully sometime this year, and then hopefully there's going to be a phase 3, which is brings us a bit closer, hopefully seeing these as legal medicines eventually in Finland as well. So those 2 things are kind of occupying my working life at the moment. And I mean, the book was also one of those things, but I'm now happy to have that out in the world and see how it will have an impact. Whether it will have an impact, we'll see.
That's really exciting to hear that there's so many things going on in Finland in this field. So I want to thank you for having this discussion with me and bringing more awareness with your work. And, I'm excited to see what's to come in the following years. I think it's a beautiful time that we are alive to witness this change, and I have trust in this new generation as well, that we are building a new society where we can really look at humans from a humane perspective and really find help that works.
Kiitos, as we say in Finland.
Soundstripe.